Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
How are you this evening, sir?
Fine, thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast. For those of you who were with us last week, just to reiterate, as we start the broadcast today, and I will say this a few weeks and then we'll leave it to rest. Please do bear in mind that the views expressed on this broadcast are those of Professor Bolaji Akinyemi and not of any other organization that he belongs to. They are wholly his own views. Sir, last week we ended up just as we were about to go into the Middle East, and we ran out of time. And I'd want to start from the Middle East this week. And since we had a break before the end of last year, a lot has happened in the Middle East. We've had the ceasefire. We've had hostages exchanged by both sides. And we've had the developments in Syria that shocked some. Would like to hear your views on the developments in the Middle East. And, maybe we go back to just pre the ceasefire. So we see a more holistic picture of what has happened over that period when things changed dramatically in the Middle East.
Well, thank you for that. I wonder where exactly we should start. I suppose the most accurate thing will be to say that the landscape of the Middle East has been completely has been redrawn. Towards the tail end of the Biden administration, we had I don't like the term. The Arabs used the word revolution loosely. I would rather say that the regime in Syria of the ruling family there came to an end. And like everything that happens in the Middle East, I'm sure the Israelis, the Turkish, the Americans, and the Russians all have a hand in what happened in Syria. The conclusion, is like an artist painting the landscape on a broad canvas. Until the end of the picture, you can't even know, you cannot predict what the Picasso is up to. All we know is that at the end of it, the Assad family rule came to an end. The Iranian influence became diminished. The Russian influence became diminished. And what we seem to find is the Turkish and the Israeli influence coming head on head with Syria as the football field, and those being the two dominant teams. And there are others who will be playing, who will be sidekicks. Obviously, the influence of the Iranians in Lebanon through the Hezbollah has been diminished. And so this is what we had. And the two winners, as I say, are the Israelis, who seized the opportunity to even occupy more of of Syrian land beyond the Golan Heights and the influence of the Turkish Republic. Obviously, we know that the president of Turkey is more interested in re-establishing the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East, and Syria is the playing field for him, and is going to come headlong with Israel in establishing aspects of spheres of influence in Syria. But more specific is what this has done to the Palestinian cause. If we are going to be blunt and honest rather than being diplomatic, the Palestinian cause has suffered a deadly blow in what has happened in Gaza to Hamas and what has happened in Lebanon to Hezbollah, and even what has happened in oh dear, what's the name of this? In Yemen, you know, where the Israelis have now managed an aerial dominance with, of course, the assistance of the United States. So they have diminished the influence and the power of what I will call they've diminished the influence of the axis of resistance, the axis of justice, because irrespective of what happens to the Palestinians, we've got to admit that they had a just cause. I would like to say this. I will welcome the intervention by our colleagues on the platform, either when they disagree with me or when they want to re-emphasize something that I have said, or there are points that they feel should be made. Because really, for one person to have a running commentary on what has happened in the Middle East, one will have to be a genius, which I don't claim to be, or one will have to have the vision of an angel or a spirit in that part of the world, since that's where all our religions come from. And I don't claim to have that kind of a vision. Scholars, friends, you know, observers, analysts on our platform are please invited, you know, when our moderator calls time out to indicate that they want to speak when there are views to be made. Finally, we've had the change of a major actor, and that is the change in the presidential occupant of the White House in the United States. From Biden, we've now moved to Trump. I haven't hidden on this program or any of the other programs that I've been that I have a disdain for the foreign policy of Biden. It was so infantile, going around talking about, you know, the drive for democracy being the linchpin of his foreign policy. And then when it came to and leading Ukraine into a war with one hand, and some will even claim with both hands tied behind them, not giving them enough weapons. And when he decides to give them the weapons, announcing 6 months, you know, ahead of time, what the weapons will be, thereby giving Russians the opportunity to prepare, you know, for the counterpunch coming from Ukraine. And yet when it came to Israel, In fact, Israel was giving more weapons than it needed. And American troops entered and had their boots in Israel, which marks a reversal from what American policy used to be. All the things that Trump did in his first term in office, moving the headquarters of the American embassy to Jerusalem, in other words, basically recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Biden didn't return the embassy to Tel Aviv. And so to that extent, to me, Biden was a failure as far as foreign policy was concerned. Now we have Trump. Nobody at all could claim he didn't know what Trump was going to do in the Middle East. He has even now surprised us by even going further than what the Israelis even wanted. I saw the grin, as if it's a Cheshire cat, on the face of Netanyahu. He couldn't resist clapping like a cheerleader as Trump announced that the United States intends to take over Gaza, drive the Palestinians off the land, and rebuild Gaza into the Middle East Riviera. If you know what Riviera stands for, playboy, grounds for playboys and play women in the Middle East. That was his vision. And he has said so openly. His advisors have tried to drag him back by reinterpreting what that could mean. He's battered down that that's what he intends to do, and that he intends to take it. Not that whether he didn't care what the Palestinians think. He openly admitted that there was going to be ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And don't say that, it's not achievable. From 1948, that's what we have had in the Middle East, ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from their original land, and every single war they have fought, the Palestinians have fought against the United States. It's not just against the Israelis, and they have lost more of their land. And now you have the American president, not the Israeli prime minister, the American president announcing that the United States was going to take over Gaza and expel all the Palestinians, that they will not be given the right of return, and that it will be turned into a playground of, loose men and loose women, because that's what the Riviera is. And what do we now have? I think that even though this may not prove popular, my view may not prove popular, I don't think that the Palestinians have played the few cards that they have. I have felt disgust when I look at the behavior of Hamas and the behavior of even the Palestinians. You will think that they fought the Israelis to a standstill. They didn't fight the Israelis to a standstill. Hamas practically disappeared as Israel pounded the Palestinians. On this program, before we went on our break, I was practically in tears as I spoke about what was being inflicted on the children and the women that we saw I was so distressed by the death of doctors and nurses. I praised to the high heavens the sacrifices that are being made by the people who are not Palestinians, aid workers who came in and were sacrificing their lives. And yet, the disgust I feel now when during this ceasefire, as I saw even the behavior of the Palestinians waving flags as they saw the prisoners that were being released, the behavior of Hamas with the hostages they were being released, you would think that Hamas fought the Israelis. You don't provoke an enemy who is stronger than you. You don't provoke them. You want to show your strength, you wait until you actually have an opportunity to inflict unacceptable damages on that enemy. But more emotion than rationality. And frankly, what is holding Israel back is the fact that there are still Israeli hostages that they are waiting to come back. Once the Hamas releases all those hostages, what Israel is going to do, I think we will have to pray to God to show mercy.
One area that I want to ask about, sir, is the role of Iran and where Iran finds itself as a nation. Iran was the feared partner in the Middle East. Now that Hamas is weakened, now that Hezbollah is weakened, now that supply routes via Syria are also now pretty much gone, where does that leave Iran? It seemed that following the attack from Israel, Iran has now pulled back. What do you think Iran should be doing now? And is there any room for Iran to still play a major role, given all those tentacles are no longer there?
It's not really what I think Iran should be doing. I already dealt with that issue when I said the Middle East is now really a theater of competition of influence between Israel and Turkey. Nobody talks about Iran anymore. In fact, what Iran needs to be careful about, especially with Trump in the White House, is to ensure that it doesn't do anything that will provoke Trump into obliterating Iran. Last week, Trump said, and I'm not using his exact words, but he said since he entered the White House, the only time his hand trembled and he himself was confronted by the enormity of something he had just done was when he signed an executive order that should either himself or any of his policy advisors be assassinated by something traced to Iran. He has given executive orders that the American Air Force should obliterate Iran from the surface of the earth. So Iran now has an existential issue concerning itself to deal with without really talking about what's happened to his influence, how to rebuild his influence in the Middle East. It's an existential problem that Iran is faced with a Trump in the White House that doesn't seem to believe in values or in reasoning about the limitation of what the international law allows him to do or not to do. International law, International Criminal Court, the World Court, International Court of Justice, all these institutions that were set up after 1948 mean nothing to Trump. Absolutely nothing. And I'm not even sure that the United States means anything to Trump. It's just Trump and what I would call the gang of billionaires who have no values. I mean, Musk and all these other people, can they really be investigated and will they come out clean? They believe in nothing except how to amass wealth. And that's just what one can say about Trump himself. You know, that picture in the White House of a convicted felon, and that is Trump, hugging and entertaining someone that has over his head hanging the International Criminal Court, holding a warrant of arrest over his head, and that's Netanyahu. In the White House used to be a symbol of purity, a symbol of a value system that was, I mean, as Reagan said, a shining light as a beacon for the rest of the world, has now become a haven for convicted felons and people who are accused of breaches of international law, humanitarian law, and a breach of international human rights, a breach of law of wars on a global scale. It beggars belief. So I don't think that right now the people in Tehran are worried about their influence in the Middle East. They are worried about, or they should be worried about whether they will survive the 4 years of Trump. And so should we. By the way, when I say we, I don't mean Nigerians or Africans, the world, because, you know, this is how, when you look at the things that, in fact, Trump wakes up every morning, I'm sure the first thing he thinks is, how much havoc am I going to do today to justify my ego? He said today, he said, oh, every day since I got into the White House, I've been signing executive orders on tariffs. Today is going to be the biggest of them all. And he said it with that silly grin on his face. Today is going to be biggest of them all. And they said, well, I mean, since we don't know the details, but that the Magna tariffs that is going to sign today is going to affect India and Africa. As of the time we are coming, we are coming on, but he hasn't released the details. So to know which one, but he said any nation that is exporting goods to the United States and that has tariffs or taxes on those goods should expect a mega tariff battle with the United States.
I have the team looking out for that as we're on the program. If we get any details, I will ask the question because I'd like to hear your reactions to what those are. I think it was meant to be 6 p.m. UK time, so it might actually be going on. But the team is having a look at that and will ask you questions about that if we can catch it before we end the broadcast. But you mentioned something there which I think forms a very good segue into Europe. And that's the fact that Netanyahu and Trump met. But now the conversation between President Trump and Putin and what has come out of that conversation and the likely impact that that is going to have not only on NATO, but on Europe at large in terms of why should the US be responding to a NATO member who is not paying 5% of GDP on defense and hasn't spent that kind of amount on defense. What is your take on the position coming out of the White House regarding NATO and regarding the conversations that have taken place with Putin today?
Well, Ukraine has been thrown under the bus, and let that be a lesson to all nations in the world. Put not your trust in American guarantee. If you go back to how Zelensky became president of Ukraine, and what amounts to what Putin had always said, that there was a coup in Ukraine, a coup organized by the Americans. Your mind should go to the release of those tapes. Who knows who recorded that conversation and organized the release of that conversation between Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, and the American embassy in Ukraine. And you'll hear a play-by-play as to, no, that is not our candidate. No, we don't want that person. No, we won't. We are against the man who is president of Ukraine right now. He must release more money to the people who are demonstrating, so that we could have a pro-West president in Ukraine. All these were what Hillary Clinton was saying. So you engineered the coup in Ukraine, okay? You got your man there, but you couldn't sustain him. And now finally, Ukraine has been thrown under the bus by the same United States. So let this be a warning to all of us. Make sure your government is one that is autochthonous, that is based on the wishes of your own people. I used to feel a lot of disgust whenever Hillary Clinton came to Nigeria, and USAID will go and dig up some Nigerians, heroes of human rights activists and so on, to moderate Hillary Clinton lecturing Nigeria about the type of leadership. You don't even hear of those activists anymore. Once Hillary Clinton left office, you don't even hear about them anymore. And that is what America does. And if you recall, I used to warn on this program that the NGOs were established and being funded by the United States to do the will of the United States. And that is why each time you have a National Assembly that says these NGOs should reveal the source of their wealth, where they were getting their money from. This human rights activists will say, this is a violation of human rights, this is a violation of democracy. Now Trump is saying, he's telling you what the rest of us have been telling you, that there's so much corruption in USAID, that the money was not going in to do what it's supposed to do, that instead, it was bribing journalists. They had journalists who were their favorites, and money was going to them to print articles, where in the case of Trump, his own was that, they were bribing journalists to publish articles favorable to Democrats and not Republicans. My own grouse is that they were publishing articles that were in favor, not of Nigerian interests, not in favor of African interests, but in favor of American interests. And Trump and Elon Musk are both saying the same thing that one has been saying. And you will see the disappearance of 75% of the so-called human rights activists. Trump is going to throw even the African human rights activists under the bus, as well as he's doing, in the United States. So really, Iran is not worried about the shrinking influence that he has. He's worried about his survival. And I hope that African or global South foreign policy elite will pay attention to what's happened in and what is happening to Ukraine. Don't get me wrong. I am not saying that we should all become dumb before our governments, and we should accept whatever our governments do to us. No, but let our own agenda for change be one that's based on our own value system, on what we want for our country, and not as agents of the United States. That's the price that Ukraine is paying now. And I feel sorry for Ukraine. After losing so many people in the past few years of that war, to now find out that they've done it all for nothing.
I can see a comment here from someone. This is Kunle Oshilaja. Once again, if I'm just calling the names,
there's a hand up already. So
yes,
just let us go ahead with whatever you call any of us, we will accept.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Dapo Thomas, please unmute yourself, sir. Dr. Thomas? Barely, but go ahead, sir.
All right. I want to support Prof.
Okay, it's not clear enough, sir. It's not clear enough, sir. It's breaking.
Okay. How about
not yet. Do you want to go off and then come back in, sir, and then ask your question? All right, I'll keep an eye out for you, sir.
how about this? Are you here now?
Oh, yes, much better, much better.
I said I like to express my support for Prof's position on Ukraine to some extent. And that's the extent to which they have allowed themselves to be used by the United States. However, I feel I'm so worried, not necessarily because of education, so worried, not necessarily for what about the other nuclear powers, powers. at their media.
Sir, we can't hear, sir. It's breaking. I think the signal might be bad where you are. Yes, sir. It's breaking. Maybe if you can move somewhere different, and then we'll try again later.
All right.
Thank you, sir. So we have a comment from Kunle Oshilaja. I think you are correct, Prof, that the Palestinian cause is diminished. America can no longer be trusted, but unfortunately, there is no other guiding superpower. That's a comment we have there. So while we were discussing the role of Iran, someone's just pointed my attention to the fact that there are two vessels headed towards Iran. One has just landed in one of the ports, and it's got chemicals from China that could help Iran rearm its missile program. How do you respond to that, sir, in light of what we just talked about? If China now appears to be helping Iran to rearm its missile program?
Well, that would be a boost in the arm for Iran. But I wouldn't put too much I wouldn't put too much emphasis on something like that, because this is something that should have been done 2 years ago. I'm sure that both America and Israel will be looking for an opportunity to launch a full-scale war on Iran. Even if something like this was going to happen, we should ask, couldn't the Chinese have done it in a subterranean way rather than something that allows both the American satellites and the Israeli satellites to trace the movement of those ships and what they are carrying and what they are. Even if they could trace the ships, surely it's not beyond the capability of China to hide the identity of what those ships are carrying. Iran should not allow itself to be set up for a counterpunch that will do enormous damage to whatever is left. I still believe that Iran is still more powerful than both the Israelis and the Americans think Iran is. I believe that. I just, I think towards the end of our program last year, I said something. I said, I want each one of us to simply ask a common sense question. What stopped Israel from launching an all-scale attack on Iran during their exchange of tit-for-tat missiles? I said, I genuinely believe, because both Israel and Iran were using the Americans as back channels to exchange information, that they were not exposed to the rest of us. And I said, I think the reason why Israel did not launch a full-scale attack on Iran was because Iran probably told the Americans that their development of nuclear and other weapons had got to the stage that they had acquired a hit-back capability, that whatever Israel does to them, they are capable of returning a hit-back capability, and that therefore there should be an understanding monitored by the Americans between Israel and Iran, that in their exchange of missiles, they will not go beyond a particular level. And that's what, because it's unlike Israel to show any moderation, especially when dealing with Arab countries. Iran is not an Arab country, it's a Persian country. But Israel doesn't show any restraint in dealing with any country within that Middle East axis. Why has it shown a restraint in dealing with Iran? I suspect that Iran has something that it has told the Americans to let Israel know, and that Israel will not be able to prevent Iran from retaliation against Israel. And I still believe in that common sense thinking, honestly.
Yeah. So, Kunle Oshilaja, please unmute yourself and make your contribution. Please make it short.
Good evening, Prof.
Good evening.
What is the role of Africa in all of this global politics, considering that ECOWAS is diminished, AU is non-existent, all the charismatic leaders of Africa are probably non-existent, and what happened and defended and dealt with apartheid of those days, we do not seem to have anything similar. Of what role can Africa play in this global politics?
Thank you. I was listening to the Secretary of Defense of the United States just before we came on air. He was addressing fellow ministers of defense of NATO. And he said, it's good to have values, but you don't shoot values. It's good to give great speeches, but you don't shoot great speeches. What you need to have is power. That's the reality of influence in the world. And he made a lot of sense to me. And when I was Nigerian foreign minister, and I kept saying Nigeria should develop a nuclear bomb, all you guys said I should have my head examined. And even when someone like Ali Mazrui talked about Nagasaki as a play on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in terms of it's only Nigeria in Africa that has the capability to develop a nuclear deterrence, even though he backed me up. But Nigerians will rather spend more money creating states. You will rather spend more money increasing salaries of members of the National Assembly, developing the reputation of importing the highest number of champagne in the world, Nigeria becoming a playfield of African generals, who couldn't probably win a war, fighting the least country in. But with the death of Murtala Mohammed, we lost a leader who had a vision and a passion for Nigeria, and who probably would have taken Nigeria to a level that we would have been able to be a voice to be reckoned with in the world. With the death of Murtala Mohammed, there's no leader, honestly, who have come to occupy the presidency of Nigeria who's been worth it. None. So it's no use now asking, where does Africa stand in all of this and so on? When we had the opportunity, and people who occupied the presidency had the opportunity, they only believed in themselves. And I won't say more than that.
There's another question here, sir, from Professor Tunde Adeniran. What should be Africa's collective position on the Israeli-Palestinian positions at this point?
Well, I believe we have stood by the United Nations resolution in asking for a two-state solution. One Jewish state and one Palestinian state. On this program, I have advocated that for that to be credible, there will have to separate those two states, a three-layer security platform. On one will be a United Nations security enforcement force. That will be first. The one in the middle will have to be a United States security force. And the third one will have to be the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, whose main job will be to ensure that there's no penetration across the first two levels. It's only that will give the Israelis the assurance that they will be safe with a Palestinian state, and and that system will also, ensure that Hamas or Hezbollah or any other, because you see, the problem that the Palestinians have themselves is how to cope with the Hezbollahs and the Hamas amongst them. I don't believe that the majority of the Palestinians actually want Hamas ruling them. But you dare not say so if you are living in Gaza. Look at what Hezbollah did to Lebanon. The Lebanese lost their state to Hezbollah. And it is since the last confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah that Lebanon has recovered its own state from the stranglehold of Hezbollah. But if you have this three-cake layer of security between separating Israel, an Israeli state, and a Palestinian state, I don't think even Hamas will try to force. They could force their way through the United Nations security force, but they wouldn't dare attack an American force that is the second layer before they then get to the IDF. That is, to me, what the African position should be, is to support the position taken by the rest of the world, by the United Nations, on a two-state solution. Thank you, Tunde, for being on the program.
A question here for someone called Osi. A nuclear Nigeria is a scary prospect owing to indiscipline plus lack of technicality and maintenance culture. Understandably, necessity though, because of how the ability to develop and defend against violence factors into being taken seriously.
I don't think that Nigeria is more indisciplined than Pakistan. I don't think that the instability that exists in Pakistan is more than the instability in Nigeria. In fact, I think Nigeria is more stable than Pakistan. And yet Pakistan is a nuclear power.
Please keep the comments coming, keep your questions coming. I will take them as I see them pop up. One question that's been sent to me, sir, is the issue of South Africa and Trump with respect to the land issue. You talked about it a little bit last week, but now that Trump has now officially said they would stop aid to South Africa, and interestingly, the president of South Africa has now been speaking with Elon Musk to try to address the misinformation that's going on. And the question that struck this individual here was, to what extent can Africa protect itself from pandering to the West or whoever, based on the funding that we're getting from them when they start to deal with issues like land-related issues? How can we insulate ourselves from this type of situation?
Well, two things. The first is that as Africans, there are times we should be proud of what South Africa stands for. And one of those times has been when South Africa has held up the flag of human rights as a defender of the human rights faith in the world. Is the one that championed the case against Israel before the International Court of Justice, the World Court. It did us proud on that occasion. Number two, Israel's confrontation with the United States, I will maintain, is something we should steer clear of. Simply because South Africa has never treated Nigeria as a friend. And so there is a limit to which we ourselves should rise up in defense of South Africa. There are situations where we should allow South Africa to carry its own course, its own cross. South Africa has not proved to be any friend of us, of Nigeria. Number two, we should welcome, Nigeria should welcome the cutting off of aid by the United States to African countries, because we have no justification to be dependent on foreign aid. In fact, we should use this as a justification for being dependent on ourselves. Unfortunately, the feeding bottle diplomacy that exists between us and Western countries has been inimical to the growth of African countries and of Nigerian countries, because if that feeding bottle is not there, then the baby will have grown beyond what it is now. It's so easy to be dependent on the feeding bottle while we waste enormous resources, one. Two, we don't even exploit the resources that are available to us. So America is doing us a great favor by saying it's no longer going to extend the feeding bottle called foreign aid, foreign assistance to us. I don't think it should frighten Nigeria. But do we have the kind of leadership that will seize the opportunity and use this as an opportunity. Even if there's gonna be a mountain to climb, but use it as an opportunity to dig into the resources that we have in order to provide the developmental aid or the developmental resources that we need to build our own countries. What we regard as our priorities are not serious priorities for any country that is serious about development. Not at all.
Thank you, sir. There's a question here from Babs Animashal. If it is possible for the Palestinians to be evicted from Gaza, what is the likelihood of any powerful country evicting Nigerians or any other African country from resource-rich areas?
You know, we should we should thank God for putting mosquitoes into Nigeria and into West Africa. Because if not for mosquitoes, West Africa would have suffered the same fate as Zimbabwe, Namibia, and South Africa. European whites would have invaded West Africa and colonized us beyond the 100 years that they spent in West Africa. It's not that we were able to defeat them. It's the mosquitoes who drove them away from here. And when they went down the Cape of Good Hope and they got to South Africa, there were no mosquitoes there. And you know what happened in South Africa? Apartheid, the destruction for, centuries of African civilization, until with the help and assistance of we West Africans, we helped the South African blacks to defeat the apartheid regime. Not that we got any recognition for it from the South Africans. They still preferred to coexist with the Afrikaans, the Boers, than to have us from West Africa live amongst them. But there's no possibility of people from Europe coming to evict us from West Africa. No, no.
All right, another question here says, I think you answered this last week, but I'll still read it anyway. Curious about Prof's thoughts and position on Rwanda's reported incursions into Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes. It's unfortunate what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, because it's become an expansion of the conflict between the Hutus and the Tutsis. Now, again, the conflict or the artificial recognition of the Hutus and the Tutsi are what the European colonizers left behind to destabilize the whole of that area. And these are the Belgians when they were leaving. Because before the Belgians came into that area, there wasn't, Tutsis meant the farmers. Hutus meant the farmers. Tutsis meant the herdsmen. They were taller because they reared cattle and they raised their cattle all over the place, while those who stayed on the farm were called Hutus. It was after the Belgians came that they then turned that distinction into what you would regard as ethnicization of the population of those areas. And then when they were leaving, seeing that the Tutsi were the minorities, they handed over the governance of Rwanda and Burundi to they handed governance into the hands of the Tutsis. Now, how you will call that a democracy, where you handed over governance to a minority and left made them the ruling class over the Hutus, who were the majority? Invariably, they revolted. And the massacres that took place, even though till today, it is still a controversial issue. Who started the massacre? Who really started the genocide? But people split over into Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, and the Congo itself. And again, this played into the hands of those who wanted to continue to exploit the resources in the Congo. So they funded and encouraged the continued conflict between the Tutsis and the Hutu, who you will find in the Congo, in Rwanda, in Burundi, in even Tanzania, in Uganda. You will find them in that central area. And as long as resources, mineral resources are there, being exploited not by Africans, but by businessmen from abroad, that conflict will continue.
Thank you very much for that, sir. And we have run out of time tonight. Thank you, everyone, for making it very interactive. We'll be back same time next week for another episode of the broadcast. Thank you very much, sir, Prof, for this evening. And remember, the views are the views of Professor Akinyemi expressed on this program. We'll be back next week. Good night.
Good night.
Boy, man, it's a guy.